Hi, my name is Tony Martinez, and I'm going to talk today about the interviewing and video presentation. So I know that we had went over um, a case review that we were reading, a case study that we were reading about. The case study was, I'm going to go ahead and just review it here, so that way we have that. So Maria, a recent social work graduate, applies for a case manager position at a nonprofit organization serving diverse communities. So she attends an interview with the agency director who oversees hiring. During the interview, she is asked the following questions. The director asks Maria about her marital status, plans for having children, and religious belief. He implies that being single and childless would make her more available for evening shifts. The director questions Maria's ability to work with certain racial or cultural groups due to her ethnic background. And he asks, can you handle difficult clients from marginalized communities? The director suggests that Maria complete a week of unpaid training before officially being hired. He states that this trial period is a standard practice, although it is not mentioned in the job posting or policy documents. During the interview, the director discusses personal detail about a current employee, including their performance struggles. He implies that Maria would be expected to work twice as hard to correct past hiring mistakes. So, based off of that case study that I just read, I went ahead and I put together a PowerPoint that I'm going to share with you. So pulling this up here, this is the interviewing presentation that I'm going to be discussing, focusing on that case study that I just read. So when we want to talk about topics that can and cannot be discussed, topics that cannot include any inquiries that directly or indirectly target protected characteristics. When we say protected characteristics, we talk about marital status, pregnancy, family planning, religious beliefs, racial or national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender, identity, age, disability status, unless it's defined context related to the job. Maria's interview case study underscores various ethical and legal issues that emerge in the hiring process for social services roles. Um, oh, so this PowerPoint is suitable and unsuitable topics for employment interviews, basing its recommendations on the principles of non-discrimination, relevance to job duties, and respect for privacy. So the director's inquiries regarding marital status, family planning, religion, ethnicity-based confident, unpaid trial work, and um, also looking at the personal performance to serve as an example, it is a close, careful examination due to implications from the protected characteristics in the workplace fairness that I just discussed with topics that cannot be discussed. Topics that can be discussed, I would go further into, okay, we can discuss any previous experience that you have related to the job that you are applying for. If you are accepted the job offer, then do you have any upcoming vacations planned? Those are things that can be discussed. So, moving on to interpersonal skills. So, workers who possess the ability to manage emotions, establish and uphold boundaries, and settle disputes are better equipped to deal with environments where interpersonal tension, discrimination, and direct provocation may happen on a regular basis. So, one ability to identify and control anger, or other responses to comment that question personal identity, whether they are hidden in journals during lessons or hushed exchanges in the cafeteria or as dialogues that seemed aimed at reaching agreement can be bolstered by emotional intelligence. So it allows for participation in sort of conversation that may arise in um, supervisory settings without rushing to any assumptions regarding the intent behind others' words or nature or making such comments. So, an obligation to act ethically and to aim for a long, hard life of workplace effectiveness, it requires various forms of both basic and advanced professionalism. So, this requires the kind of reflective practice and professionalism discussed previously in some of the things that we've done, and it's closely linked to ensuring that the work-life role is fulfilling and reasonable, sustainable, and meaningful. So it's critical to advocate for the client and oneself as it falls together with the ethical principles in work. The long-term outcome of working in diverse human services environments could be viewed um, you know, could have different points of views, which coexist with interpersonal skills mentioned earlier, and acknowledge limits of professionalism and client-centered ethics. Moving on for recommendations for the hiring process. So in nonprofits, the best way to combine accountability and hiring oversight is to organize the who, how, why, and what of the workforce composition. So, for an organization to truly achieve its stated aim of diversity, it must devote sufficient funding and personal resources to this goal. One tool that organizations use in their attempt is the regular utilization of demographic and retention data for internal processes. So, should the internal processes fail to yield the desired workforce composition, organizations will reassess and amend these processes using figures as reference points. So, to create a fair hiring process, the job posting must clearly outline the essential job duties, the qualifications, the compensation, and kind of like we were talking earlier about a trial in this case study, any trial conditions linked to a job offer must also be transparent and communicated to candidates. So agencies cannot depend on informality as a process to obscure its genuine and deceptive elements. So once a trial condition is disclosed in the job notice, it turns into an illegal or sometimes an at-will employment. So this is because an employer cannot simultaneously uphold both the at-will arrangement and the trial conditions. So we move on to the NASW Code of Ethics. So when we go back to Maria's case study, it's concerning that Maria is required to finish an unpaid week of training before she's even hired for the job. So the nonprofit appears to be in violation of fundamental labor laws by having her work for free, regardless of her consent or desire to gain experience. So this is addressed in the NASW Code of Ethics. It forbids social workers um, by performing work without providing compensation. So this is concerning when it comes to helping professionals, which are not required to do free work from individuals who probably cannot afford to provide it. So, adding on to that, Maria's ability to collaborate with specific, racial or cultural groups based on her Latino heritage, it violates the NSAW Code of Ethics. So, it's a matter of cultural competence. And so, when we move on a little deeper into that, um, the clientele of social workers is more diverse than social workers themselves. And there are so many clients who do not share the same excuse me. There are many clients who do not share the same appearance, behavior, or background as the social workers serving them. So we want to ensure that when we're in this hiring process, that we're following the code of ethics. So, moving on a little bit more, so social services agency with a Christian worldview. So, Christian values shape a leadership perspective that emphasizes the inherent worth of every individual. They promote a servant leadership role. They commit to restorative justice. And when these values are converted into the workplace norm, they require a director to show subordinates unwavering respect and avoid making assumptions and narratives that are only partially understood. So they urge that leaders and guardians and those who guide, they lead in a way that reflects Christian values. That means to take the love that we have for our neighbor and professionalize it into principles of equality, confidentiality, and non-discrimination. And so to embody these values entails the adoption of specific policies and procedures. So it can even ensure the hiring process is transparent. So every applicant should clearly understand what the job entails and whether any training will take place on the job. And would enhance diversity of the interview panels and applicant pools despite the threat of tokenism. This would benefit both applicants and interviewers. We would make sure that everyone participating in the hiring process adheres to specific common sense guidelines. So think about it. If you're asking these questions, is it acceptable to inquire about the applicant's prayer frequency? Is it all right to ask him or her for the name of their professor? Is it permissible to inquire of the applicant about how large her family is or how many children she has? When we think about those questions, all of the answers are no. So it may sound harsh, but you'd also want to keep the results of hiring confidential, um, even in that Christian worldview, because again, that goes back to loving our neighbor, professionalizing these principles, equality, confidentiality, and non-discrimination. So, responding professionally, um, back again to Maria's case, when the idea of unpaid training is mentioned, Maria may question whether it's legal. So, once more, she can convey her professionalism while doing this. So, I'm very interested in any onboarding and training opportunities you provide. Is something she could have said. Could you give me a written account of this trial period? Could you tell me what our state labor laws say about doing such an unpaid trial period? Provided there is no wrongdoing taking place, an employer should not be bothered by Maria's inquiry. But by her even asking, she appears like she's someone who she wants to safeguard a client, even safeguarding herself in this dubious circumstance. So, in Maria's case, the interviewers, they have overstepped multiple boundaries, questions regarding her marital status, plans for children, religious beliefs, they're all considered discriminatory. And so the interviewers appear to be assuming that her ethnicity affects her ability to work with particular groups. Job seekers need to be prepared to tackle all of these issues, but they should approach them with the highest degree of professionalism and respect for both themselves and the interviewer. And this is especially the case in social work, where there are great expectations for individuals to maintain a high ethical standard. So, for Maria to respond professionally to these questions where she might be thinking, no, these questions are not right. I'm not sure. Why are they asking me? This doesn't seem fair. She can find a way to ask her questions, but in a professional manner. So that brings us into interviews aligning with ethical standards. So, in addition to training all hiring managers on permissible and impermissible interview topics and questions, I would say that human resources department should also provide education on the concept of unconscious bias. So, the tendency for humans to evaluate someone they know belongs to a different group. It could be a different gender, race. Um, different background. Additionally, they should instruct them on how to use a written evaluation rubric for assessing the candidates to ensure that the decision-making process is transparent and can also be contested if needed be. So, organizations should not only adopt clear and written hiring policies, but these policies should also adhere to relevant anti-discrimination and wage and hour laws and clearly prohibit impermissible interview topics. So, to achieve fair hiring, organizations must ensure that job postings reach the appropriate audience and that the job description clarify the essential aspects of the job to be performed. So for quite a while, practitioners have contended the job analysis regarding of its method, be it, maybe a questionnaire, focus group, observation. It's essentially a form of work simulation. Certain practitioners have opted for a different method of distillation, the work sample test. So making sure that these interviews are not biased, that we're aligning with all of the ethical standards, that we're following the NASW Code of Ethics as well. That brings me into a couple of references that I used when I built this slide. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing here. So that is the overview of my presentation today. So I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free and reach out. Thank you.